in-depth investigative.
Welcome back. As lawmakers gather in Austin, Governor Rick Perry is flexing his power, hoping to set the tone for the session. With a lot of insiders calling for the legislature to restore funds cut last session, the governor is instead pushing tax relief. This week, I sat down with him one-on-one. When you talk about tax relief, are we talking like property taxes, business taxes, what?
All of it's on the table. I think it's wise for us to not preclude anything from the standpoint of relief, whether it's regulatory or legal or our tax structure. For instance, in my budget compact that I've talked about over the last 6 months, I've asked for the legislature to consider making the small business tax exemption, businesses between or up to $1 million of proceeds, exempt from that business tax. That's a good example of what we're talking about.
The comptroller's revenue estimate, she says by the end of this upcoming biennium, the rainy day fund will have more than $11 billion. You know, I think it has a 13 billion or roughly 13 billion cap. Are we eventually going to have to get money out of there if it reaches that cap?
Or you reduce the tax that supplies the rainy day fund. I mean, I'm always intrigued with the automatic position of let's go spend the money. My automatic position is, you know, let's fund the appropriate parts of state government, and then let's talk about giving tax relief. We know it works. I mean, we've got too much of a track record in Texas over the last decade about relieving the impact on the business community and they're the ones that create the tax. That is the most important thing government does, to make sure that entrepreneurs know that they can risk their capital and have a return on their investment. If you don't do that first, if you don't do that well, then you're not going to have the resources coming in to pay for teacher salaries, to pay for educational needs in this state, or transportation infrastructure. Those have to be paid for. And if you want to see the opposite, if you want to see where, well, let's just raise taxes and keep spending at the level without regard of the impact that it has on businesses, go to California, go to Washington, D.C., go to Illinois. Those are two states and a federal government that are in trouble economically. We're not, because we put thoughtful processes into place and not gone to that fallback position that all too often occurs of, oh, we just can't make tough decisions, so let's put the burden on the business men and women of this country and of this state.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, you just mentioned possibly reducing the oil and gas tax, correct?
No, you asked me what some of the options were. That's one of them. And I absolutely, if you reach a level of whatever the cap is, or whatever the legislature and the people of the state of Texas constitutionally think the cap should be. One of my budget compact ideas was this, that if a particular fee is raised for a particular purpose and it's not being used for that, then do away with it. So the reduction of the cost of doing business, whether it's in the oil and gas industry or whether it's, you know, small mom and pop business, makes abundant good sense to me. The oil and gas industry is putting a lot of people to work today in the state of Texas. I don't have a problem with having a conversation about do we allow them to keep more of their money so they can put more Texans to work.
With the Lieutenant Governor, one of the ideas he's thrown out is to set aside maybe $1 billion for water infrastructure or water conservation. Is that something you would support?
I think the Lieutenant Governor and I agree that finding ways to fund long-term that type of infrastructure growth is important. The rainy day fund, a one-time expenditure out of that to create some type of fund, is certainly one of the ideas that's legitimate, and we should have that conversation.
Can you see any other uses for the rainy day fund this session?
Well, yes, the most important use of that rainy day fund is to keep your hands off of it so that we keep a substantial savings account there, and the bond decision makers, and that in turn allow us to borrow money at the lowest rate will keep Texas as the highest bond rating that it can be. So keeping a healthy rainy day fund and not spending that is the highest and best use.
Beyond the session, the governor says he'll announce whether he'll run again in July, but who does he think should fill the state's second highest post? Our interview continues online. Click on the legislature section of KXAN.com for the full clip. And coming up, water bubbles to the top as the early fight in the session, and what comes of the outcome, the speaker's race, and what does it mean for the fate of Texas? Our roundtable of political journalists has an inside look at the political fallout of this first week, next on In Session In Depth.